everyone. Welcome to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and Brett Ehrlich with you. No third person, just the two of us.
No, but if it helps, we can speak about ourselves in the third person. I mean, Brett can talk about himself in any way Brett sees fit.
All right,
Anna?
Don't do that though.
No, I won't. It
Yeah.
really weirded me out as soon as I started doing it.
Yeah, it's creepy, right? When
Yeah.
people do that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, just the two of us.
Yeah.
I think we can make it if we try.
Just the two of us, you and I?
Yeah, exactly.
God, we're on such a good vibe today.
Exactly.
If the first story wasn't about like the impending nuclear holocaust that would emerge from any potential decertification of the Iran deal, like I would be upset, but it is just the two of us.
Just the two of us. By the way, you heard that correctly. Now we're worried about nuclear issues with another country, not North Korea. I mean, yeah, North Korea is still on the table, don't get us wrong. But now there are some potential issues with Iran because we have a man-child as our president. All right, so later on in the hour, we are going to give you more updates on the mass shooting in Las Vegas. Police have released body cam footage and it is graphic and difficult to watch, but I do think it's important to take a look at what people had to go through and the type of danger that police officers were put in as a result of this crazy person having access to a gun part that should be banned. And then later on are we doing anything fun in hour one? No, nothing fun. Nothing. Republicans are starting to think a little bit, so we'll tell you how and why.
I saw some interesting video of alternative like automatization appliances and accessories for guns that aren't bump stocks that I will mention when we get to that story. And those videos were like from the late 80s, early 90s. So those were funny in a very disturbing way, a very like feather-haired, high-hip, unitard way. But that's the closest I was to having fun when researching for today.
Yeah, it is a heavy news day. And in hour two, Grace Baldridge will join us, and it's also a heavy news day for hour two. But there's a lot going on in the entertainment world. Entertainment and politics collide, and we'll get to that a little later. All right, so let's get started with some foreign policy. Donald Trump is expected to make a statement publicly in regard to decertifying the nuclear deal with Iran. Now, the press has obtained information from individuals close to the president. These are essentially White House officials and military officials who are insiders and have a clue as to what Trump is planning on doing next week. But before we get into the details, I do want to be clear that they caution that Trump could change his mind and do something completely different. So this is a preliminary report about what Trump plans on doing with the nuclear deal with Iran. And as you know, he has been on the record on various occasions talking about how he feels the US is getting a raw deal with the agreement that was made. Now, let's get to the details of what's going on. Trump plans to announce next week that he will decertify the international nuclear deal with Iran, kicking the issue to a reluctant Congress. Now, decertify is the key word there because it doesn't mean that he's entirely scrapping it. It just means that he is now saying, I don't certify it, which by the way, the deal indicates that the president after X amount of time would have to certify it and recertify it, and he's decided not to do so. And so he's saying, I want Congress to take a look at it. I want to negotiate. I want a better deal. And then if we get a better deal, then maybe I won't impose sanctions on Iran. Now, if you can remember, this is all about Iran testing or developing nuclear capabilities. And Iran has been complying with the deal that was agreed upon, and I'll give you the details to that. Now, this decertification would essentially start a 90-day congressional review period to consider the next steps for the United States. On its own, the step would not break the agreement among Iran, the United States, and other world powers, but would start a clock on resuming sanctions that the US had lifted as part of the deal. Now, Trump is also expected to deliver this speech on October 12th, which is next week, laying out a larger strategy for confronting the nation it blames for terrorism and instability throughout the Middle East. So just to be absolutely clear, there are other countries involved in this deal. It wasn't an agreement or a negotiation between Iran and the United States and those two countries alone. You had other countries, including China and Russia, involved, and they've been very clear about the fact that they like the deal and they have no intentions of renegotiating. Also, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said last month that he will not reopen the deal for negotiation. So he is standing firm. And representatives of Iran, China, and Russia told Secretary of State Rex Tillerson the same thing during a meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly session. Now, Rex Tillerson does not agree with Donald Trump's stance on the Iran deal. And it is interesting that we're getting word of, this change in foreign policy literally a day after NBC News broke a story regarding Rex Tillerson calling Trump a moron. So could that have fueled Trump's decision to do this? Possibly. I mean, I think it might be a factor. But to be fair, Trump has been very aggressive in stating his opposition to the deal.
The way Trump represents his foreign policy to the world and mostly to his base is one that he might change his mind at any time.
Right.
He doesn't want to lay out his strategy ahead of time, and that's the face he's put forward, is that you don't know what he's going to do. Now, conveniently, that coincides with something that could be interpreted as not having any real approach. That's one side of it. And then again, the way it could also be interpreted is that Rex Tillerson is the good cop and Trump's trying to be the bad idiot. It's one of those moves where he's just trying to put in front of the world, I'm the one who wants to take this thing, tear it up. If you don't want to face me, you better deal with Rex. But the problem is, does anyone have any confidence that Trump, self-professed amazing negotiator, could really actually negotiate anything? One way to interpret the moves that he's making right now is that he's going to go from a deal that was made to ensure some kind of oversight over Iran developing nuclear weapons into essentially a high sanction package, which is essentially, it seems like what we had with North Korea, which is a strategy that he says is stupid anyway. So are we going to backslide into another thing? I don't know.
Such a good point. The sanctions don't work with North Korea. But here's the thing, the sanctions are actually more effective with North Korea because the international community disagrees with what North Korea is doing. In this case, the other world powers that are involved in this deal disagree with Trump. So they're not planning on imposing sanctions. So it would just be the United States imposing sanctions. And by the way, real quick to the point regarding Trump being a great negotiator. This is now the second time that he has attempted to undo legislation or undo something that Obama did during his administration by saying, I don't like it. And so as a result, I'm gonna throw it over to Congress so they can deal with it. Is that a good negotiator?
Right, and what has Congress done? It's proven that it can't do anything. And probably what Congress will do is go do some kind of calculation that has nothing to do with the effectiveness of any change in policy, but rather the effect on whether they'll get voted back into office. And I just think that this is one of those, it's one of those issues that the general population will not have the ability really to understand enough. So it's possible they would be asked, if Congress goes back with the same nuclear deal as we had before, will you be able to stay in office? And the voters will say, sure, I guess, I don't know.
That's a good point,
only difference is if these these stones in the pile of failed initiatives pile up high enough, maybe this will be, I guess to change the metaphor, the straw that broke the camel's back, but I just don't see that happening. What's most disturbing to me is how many damn fronts this guy's opening up. He escalates everything.
Escalated North Korea, escalating the situation with Iran.
Escalated Steph Curry. Escalated, ice in his blood. Steph Curry, the most laid back person in the universe. The guy whose entire countenance is a "you mad bro" meme. And he escalated him going to a party.
I know.
To a national disaster. It's terrible. I don't know where
He's escalated unnecessary tensions between the US mainland and Puerto Rico. I love that you brought up the fact that he's escalating racial tensions, but that was to be expected. That's what he ran on. And so the NFL situation, I think, is a symptom of what he essentially used, the strategy he used to get elected. But look, we're talking about nuclear arms, we're talking about, other world powers, we're talking about making enemies out of our allies in a lot of cases. And it should concern you because, the job of the government, as I've said over the last, several days, is to protect us and to de-escalate situations like this. And he's not that type of person. I feel like he enjoys the conflict, he enjoys the drama, and even though he says he knows how to make good deals and he's a great negotiator, the reality is he comes in, he escalates tensions, and then he steps back and tells other people to deal with it. And that's not what a leader does, certainly not the leader of one of the most powerful countries in the world. Now, I want to give you his explanation for why he thinks the US engaged in a raw deal with Iran, okay? Because I didn't really understand it. I had to do some digging, and Trump himself hasn't been able to articulate this. So this is based on actual experts who have looked at the situation and are basically speculating that this is the issue that Trump has with the Iran deal. Okay, and so let me tell you what it is. So first of all, is Iran complying with the terms of the deal? Yes. Iran is complying. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is in charge of monitoring the deal, has repeatedly certified that Tehran is complying with the limits on its nuclear program. The Trump administration, though, has yet to produce any evidence to the contrary. So again, this deal pertained to the nuclear development in the country. That's it. Now, here's what some believe is the problem with Iran. Iran funds hardline Shia militias in Iraq that commit human rights abuses against the Sunni minority, helping fuel support for ISIS. It has helped play a vital role in propping up Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. It also funds and arms the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which is the main reason why Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, has an issue with it. It has played a growing role in fueling the Yemeni civil war, sending arms and money to the Houthi military group that toppled the country's internationally recognized government. Okay, so let's stop right there.
I don't think you need to go further in terms of Trump's logic, his internal logic, than the instinct that a lot of his supporters have, which is there's no way Iran's actually following through on this agreement. What he needs to do to satisfy a lot of folks is to give evidence. But I think that is his instinct. He has this weird instinct for neutralizing the ambitious and powerful people and doing it in a way that he then defers to ideas or resorts to ideas like a lot of people are saying this, and he just throws up that cloud of there's no way Iran will do that, will follow through on their anti-nuclear ambitions. But
they're following through on their nuclear ambitions, or they're following through with the deal. But okay? They are following through with the deal, and it has to do with them attempting to develop nuclear weapons. They are not developing the nuclear weapons. Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I get fired up about this because it's so incredibly frustrating. Now, if he has a problem with some of the negative influences that Iran has in the international, spectrum, I hear you. That is cause for concern. But this deal was specifically about the development of nuclear weapons in Iran, and the negotiation essentially stopped them from developing those weapons. But here's the thing, how about we take a good, long, hard look at what the United States is doing? Because just last week, there was an extensive report indicating that the Trump administration would like to loosen restrictions on weapons manufacturers selling arms and selling weapons to foreign governments directly. Oh, you don't think that could cause some issues? You don't think that could fuel wars? You don't think that could fuel civil rights abuses? You don't think that's gonna be a problem? Of course it is. Also, I know we forget, but remember in February, one of our Marines died, and 9 innocent children, civilians in Yemen, died because of a failed military operation that the US carried out in Yemen. Now, why are we in Yemen? Why are we at war with Yemen, right? Well, it turns out that Saudi Arabia, which was involved in 9/11, okay? We're so worried about 9/11 and stopping terror, but Saudi Arabia, that was involved with 9/11, is one of our allies. And so, since it's one of our allies, we're gonna go ahead and fight their war and support the Saudi-backed leader in Yemen. And we're going to do drone strikes. Trump has quadrupled the drone strikes in Yemen and internationally in other countries that we're also doing drone strikes in. I mean, he's going to sit there and pretend like we're the good guys. I mean, his policies have been so destructive. We've been so critical of Obama and the drone strikes that he did. Well, Trump doubled down on them. He quadrupled down on them.
Right, but he scores points with his base and various other people by saying that I don't trust Iran. And he then can throw up whatever smokescreen he can throw up in order to say that, listen, if we have eased sanctions on Iran, that gives them more money to fund our enemies. Now, that at least makes logical sense. Whether you agree with our ends overall, that's a different story. But I at least can identify his logic in that situation, which gives me, it heartens me that I can go after it and attack it and somehow win. But I mean, it's pretty transparent what he's doing.
Look, you're absolutely right. It's cheap brownie points, shallow statements that he never backs up with any type of evidence. It's the same thing that allowed him to skate by in the election and win. And that's the part that really gets to me because, look, regardless of how much you hated Hillary Clinton, and I get it, right? In the very least, she knew what she was talking about. She was able to articulate what the issues were, whereas he just attacked people. He acted like he was the tough guy. He never backed anything up. He never detailed a single policy. And I remember, when I was researching for the debate with Ann Coulter, she kept arguing in one of her books, "In Trump We Trust." That was the title of her book. Now she complains about how Trump isn't trustworthy, which is hilarious.
And everyone who's gotten to know him stops trusting him.
Right,
that's
exactly.
the thing. And she's at that point, so welcome to the party, pal.
Exactly. But I remember in her book, she kept repeating over and over again that people kept criticizing Trump because he wouldn't outline detailed policy proposals. But then she failed to explain what his detailed policy proposals were. He never had any. He never had any.
But he's really good at identifying those things that a lot of people say when they complain. And it's that, it's the Iran we got this terrible nuclear deal with Iran and they're not, and it's Iran and they're not following through on it. You trust them? There's no way you trust them. A lot of people don't trust them. And other things that he said in his UN speech that I've talked to a lot of conservatives who really rally around it, which is, well, listen, we pay for the UN, we're bankrolling the UN and they're not doing anything. A lot of people hear that and that's enough. And that's where he succeeds. That's where he lives and breathes. That's his bread and butter, is those moments where he gets people saying, yeah. And the average person doesn't want to get into the nitty gritty of all these policy initiatives. And we got to think of the way to structure the arguments so that you can win in that battlefield, that quick battlefield.
Let me know how. Because I'm actually dying to learn that art. I'm completely unaware of it.
I don't know, we'll go through it as we hit each one.
Because I just got into like a spiel about the civil war in Yemen. I know, people's eyes
well, with this, over. It's like, listen, if we do what we're about to do, we're falling right into a trap. Look at the other countries you listed that are against our actions. It's China, Russia, and Iran. And China and Russia are fine. They're like, well, Iran hates America. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This seems like a pretty awesome deal. They're not gonna bomb me. They're not gonna, and China's just like, I need to sell literally everyone infrastructure equipment. And I'd like to be the country that does that because America did that for a very long time and we're cheaper. And we don't care. We're not going to export our way of life onto you. We're not going to try to change the internal dynamic of your government. We're not even going to pretend to do any of that stuff. We just want to sell it to you and we'll debt finance it and we'll get you on the hook for us and you'll realize later and that'll maybe bite them in the ass down the road. But right now they all seem to be on board against us because we're the big guy. And that's what a lot of conservatives come back around and say, like, listen, they say that they're mad at us when we say that we don't want to fund the UN anymore, but they gotta have our money. And it's things like this where we have to find out the right strategy so we aren't just pushing everyone away so that they unite against us. And there's just better ways to do it. And one of them is a nuclear treaty. And you get that so you get them not to escalate. You make sure that everyone's behind not having a nuclear Iran.
He probably thinks a nuclear treaty is like a chocolate molten lava cake. A big,
I just need him to prove he can do something. Yeah, right. He just needs to be able to prove that he can do something other than what I said before, which is say things people say at barbecues when they're complaining.
Yeah.
He needs to have a victory, and he hasn't had the only victories he's had are these behind the scenes ones that I think most people would come around and realize are bad, which are like deregulation of industry.
Right.
Poisoning waterways and the air. And if that happens, we'll reevaluate, but it hasn't happened yet. This, as you pointed out, is he's kicking it over to Congress to come up with some new ideas, and that has never helped him. And I don't know how many Luther Strange battles he needs to lose in order to come around on some new strategy.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that strategy would be to go more wacko and go more Roy Moore. Anyways, that made me feel better.
Yeah, that's some food for thought while we're on our break. So let's take our break, and then when we come back, I will fill you in on the recent updates on the shooting in Las Vegas.
TYT is unique in a lot of ways.
I'm gonna ask some uncomfortable questions.
I feel like I missed out.
So what is going on? If I don't eat, my head's gonna explode.
As I take my shirt off, just goes, is that your body?
Now we move to inappropriate story number 2.
I just never felt guilty about masturbation.
It's amazing.
I could take partial credit for opening up your sexuality.
I was the kid in the pool with the shirt off. Let's just call it what it is. I was that kid.
Well, you deal with the bitch side of me, right? But you're my boss, so that's what happens.
I think we're more likely to win. They do see it from a frame of the rich and the powerful, and they don't realize that.
The last time that happened, we elected Abraham Lincoln.
I don't know, wouldn't it be wonderful if we unfucked the world?
You and I are a disaster.
Don't stereotype all cops, don't stereotype all anything. Blowing up like Dave Kohler on Twitter, that's pretty good progress.
I didn't know you could leave positive comments.
It's a very TYT thing. I'll tell you a whole bunch of depressing stuff so that at the end I can give you hope. Winning is, in terms of change and positive change, is not just possible, it's inevitable.
Great time to be alive.
Let's burn this mother down. How's that what you're saying? Fuck it, let's go do it. And that's why I keep thanking you guys for being members. Because together, we got their attention.
Thanks for tuning in, and as always, stay strong.
Been easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
He said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
It's the Democrats who lull you to sleep, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda.
Most of the people are either unemployed, underemployed, or fucked.
This is why you lost to Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you? Whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this with you. The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels. Do not freak out.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian, Brett Ehrlich with you. I never plug anything that we do, but sometimes people ask. So you can follow us on social media. We both have social media. I'm rarely on Twitter, but Anna Kasparian, and Instagram, Anna Kasparian Official.
And I'm at Pontifex. It seems like it's the Pope tweet, but it's mine.
Are you serious?
No, not at all. That's actually the Pope's Twitter. I'm at Brett Ehrlich.
You can
see my tweets like the one I did at about 2:30 a.m. last night when Howard the Duck was trending. It really is me being angry at 2:30 that I can't sleep most of the time, so follow it.
Oh my God, I'm having sleeping issues too.
Uh-oh.
Really bad. Okay.
Yeah, I took NyQuil. That's why I feel so weird today.
Maybe that's what I should do. Anyway, we'll get to that later. Maybe we'll talk about it in the post-game show for our members. We love our members. You guys are the best. In fact, let me do a member shout out because you guys deserve it, and because of you, we are able to do what we do. Cameron Elliott is one of our members, and so is Fareed Saraf. Thank you for keeping us independent and allowing us to do a job that we absolutely love without any worry of censorship. And then TYT Lives, Nick says, Obama did it, referring to the Iran nuclear deal, so Trump has to kill it. That's the only reason Trump hates the Iran deal. I think that's part of it for sure. I think this whole, and this is my speculation, so please don't take this as if it's fact. Again, speculation, my analysis of it. I just think it's interesting that this was leaked literally the day after this whole Tillerson thing happened, and Tillerson's against reneging on the Iran nuclear deal. I just think he's like this little child, and I can't imagine him sitting there and getting briefed on what the nuclear deal actually entails.
Let's just give him a city-state somewhere between like Italy and France that can be his, and he can run it like a tyrant, and it's just like an acre and a half, and he can do all the petulant monarchy that he wants, and he doesn't jeopardize anyone.
That would be the real life version of life beyond the wall, right?
Beyond the wall.
There wouldn't be Icemen or anything crazy like that, but it would be like this dystopian.
Oh yeah, well, it just
America.
I mean, he's done it in multiple places. It's his buildings.
Yeah.
Guy has a giant golden towers of Babel with his name on them.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Just let him do that. Let him rule those.
Yeah. Just another name says, what you guys are forgetting is drama is good for ratings, and that's all Trump wants. I mean, he's treating his leadership like The Apprentice. He's firing people left and right.
But the thing is like he's the project manager. Like these are your projects, like the disaster relief in Puerto Rico that you didn't assign enough employees to go there. And that's your failure, and so, but he can't fire himself. It's just this fail upward management technique where you blame people and replace them.
Yeah.
And that happens all over the place in every organization you can possibly fathom until they realize it's not the defensive coordinator, it's not the offensive coordinator, it's the head coach. Now we get rid of him. And that's what he's been doing since he got elected. It's just been so quick.
Yeah. All right, let's get to updates on the shooting that happened in Vegas over the weekend. Police officials in Las Vegas have released body cam footage of the mass shooting that took place in Las Vegas just this past weekend. Now, we're gonna show you some of that footage, and it is graphic. It is difficult to not only watch, but also listen to. However, it gives you a sense of what police had to go through. It gives you a sense of the confusion, and just the fact that so many people put their lives on the line to help save some of these victims. So with that said, again, graphic warning, let's take a look.
Hit my head. Hey, go that way, go that way, go that way. Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down. Stay down. Where's it at? North of the Mandalay Bay. It's coming out of a window.
That's so terrifying. When the video, not this video, but when videos from victims had been released on social media, a lot of people were speculating that he had a automatic weapon, an automatic weapon. It sounded like an automatic weapon, but we now know that he had a semi-automatic weapon and used a device known as a bump stock to essentially turn it into an automatic weapon. Police have now confirmed that 12 of the weapons that they found in his room were fitted with a bump stock. So he had several weapons that had this capability. Also, just to give you some more information, through this investigation so far, they have not found a motive, and it's driving everyone, including the investigators, crazy. Now, Sheriff Lombardo held a press conference yesterday and addressed a number of questions that the press and the public have. So I want to show you some of those answers. Let's take a look at video 2.
Question about Ms. Stanley and her comments to the lawyer that she had no idea what was going on.
Well, I think any person put in her situation would probably answer the same way. But like I said, we're not privy to the investigative leads that were obtained today. Mr. Rouse could probably give you some better clarification to that. I haven't been briefed by the FBI on that interview as of yet. What was the other question, sir?
You said that you are still trying to figure out whether he had any accomplices.
Right. Yeah, we're obviously going through that. It's troublesome that this individual was able to move this amount of gear into a hotel room unassisted. It's troublesome for the amount of stuff that he had at both residences unassisted. So there's people that know this individual. There's people that could help us understand this individual. Because, interesting enough, I read a periodical earlier today, and it was from an FBI profiler that didn't understand this individual. Usually there's a telltale sign associated with these type of actions, reclusive, a plethora of things associated with this mindset, and we have not found that yet.
So real quick, in the beginning of his statement, he addressed a question that the reporter asked him about Mary Lou Danley's statement. And Mary Lou Danley was the girlfriend of the shooter. She flew back from the Philippines to cooperate with FBI officials. And in her statement, she said the following, graphic 8. It never occurred to me in any way whatsoever that he was planning violence against anyone. He never said anything to me or took any action that I was aware of that I understood in any way to be a warning that something horrible like this was going to happen. And so Sheriff Lombardo in that press conference said, yeah, that's the type of answer that I would expect of anyone in this situation.
But in what way do you expect that? Do you expect that in that I am protecting my loved one, or do you expect that in, because I don't expect that.
Yeah.
Unless it's I'm protecting my loved one.
Look, I think Sheriff Lombardo is put in an incredibly difficult situation, and it's hard to answer these questions without ever speculating and implying anything that seems speculative. That seemed a little speculative though, because the way that I read it was that he was implying that, if she was in any way knowledgeable about what he was gonna do, then she's not gonna just tell the FBI, like, yeah, I knew about it. But I don't know, that's my read of it.
The thing is, there's so little for us to actually grab onto, and that's what they're getting at. That's very disconcerting, disorienting. It makes you feel crazy. It makes me feel nuts when I think about it. And the person I know who was out there, that's the one thing that she was at the concert. It's the one thing that I said yesterday on the show that she's grappling with. She's like, I mean, just the trauma of the experience isn't what's gnawing at her as much as why did he do this? But then you hear stuff like that, and you hear the sisters give interviews in Australia. She was never tipped off to anything strange about to happen, but he said, I got you a ticket to the Philippines that's real cheap, so you should go. Also, I'm gonna wire you $100,000. That's the opposite of someone looking for something really cheap.
Yeah, you're right. There were also reports confirmed by police that he had purchased 33 weapons in one day. And the Las Vegas Journal-Review reported that he had been prescribed anti-anxiety medication. I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't seen that reported by any other source as of yet. It might be confirmed by other sources as well. There have also been reports that he was gambling for 8 hours straight prior to the shooting. These are all things that could play a role in trying to piece together a motive, but to be clear, there is no confirmed motive as of yet. And that is driving a lot of people crazy because, again, he had no criminal record. There's nothing from his past, nothing about his displays in public that would tip anyone off to this. Also, people are concerned about the fact that he has had a history of booking hotels like at music festivals with a clear view of the concert goers, the festival goers. That happened in August for Lollapalooza. And also Paddock had reserved a room via Airbnb at the Ogden Luxury Apartment Complex, which overlooked the site of the Life is Beautiful Festival, an event over the previous weekend that featured acts such as Gorillaz and Lorde.
And when you look at the timeline of his girlfriend being out of town, the Life is Beautiful Festival came within the window of her being away. So he sent her out, at least they have her being in Tokyo, going to the Philippines on the 15th of September. So that falls within the window of him making sure she's not there so that he could ostensibly take out and do this.
Lombardo also disclosed the fact that they found materials to make explosives in his car. They discovered several containers of explosives and 1,600 rounds of additional ammunition in his car. I believe ammonium nitrate was one of the materials that they found in his vehicle. I want to also talk a little bit about the fact that some evidence in the room made it appear that he didn't intend to kill himself. It appeared that he actually intended to escape. And that is based on what Lombardo said during the press conference. Let's go to video 3 and hear from him.
You suggested that after he saw the security guard that his concern became himself. Did you see any evidence that he planned to survive this or try to escape?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is? What's that?
I can't tell you.
So he wouldn't elaborate on that, and that's understandable considering they're still investigating this.
Yeah, it's such a strange feeling until we have some sense of surety. And for the person I talked to that was there, she doesn't believe it's ever going to come. She is in a point where she doesn't think there will ever be any closure. She's at the point where on the ground, she and others thought that there were multiple shooters. Like these are people with multiple tours in military service saying, I just don't believe it's one person. So it's right now it is all of that swirling that comes down to people just all we want is an answer.
Yeah.
That's all we're looking for. It is really terrifying that there's the Life is Beautiful festival that he booked tickets at. It's interesting to see. I read a report that the Austin City Limits told people if you are nervous about your security, know that we have the best security that we can put into effect. But also, if you want your money back, that's fine. Yeah, just let us know. And they're refunding tickets if people feel uneasy about it. They don't want that to be what makes people go and not be able to enjoy themselves for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think it's great that they're doing that because I would feel uneasy. But at the same time, do you let someone like this crazy person change your way of life? I feel I don't want to go to music festivals right now. And also, here's another thing that I'm concerned about. By talking about this, and you have to talk about it as part of the media because the public deserves to know the information. This is the largest mass shooting in modern history. But at the same time, does this give other deranged individuals any ideas? I don't know. And it's hard to strike the appropriate balance as a member of the media.
Yeah, and you do need to talk about it not just as a member of the media, but as a person.
Yeah,
because otherwise you're just going to bottle it up. It's nuts. Like at my house, we'll just be in silence playing Candy Crush for a while, and then just kind of sit up and have a new thought and be like, "What about this? What about that?" And it's really traumatizing. The question is, will it change my way of life? There are changes I think we need to make in the country as a result of this. And there has been promising talk in the news about that actually potentially happening. Putting in new regulations.
You're right. So let's transition over to that. Republicans have been historically resistant to any and all attempts to regulate guns in the country. In fact, some Democrats who lean conservative have been resistant. And it's interesting to see that after the mass shooting that took place in Las Vegas, killing 58 innocent individuals, now some Republicans and even the NRA are changing their tune about one specific part that the shooter was able to legally purchase. Now, this has to do with bump stocks. Bump stocks are devices that essentially turn a semi-automatic weapon to a weapon that acts as an automatic weapon. And police officials have confirmed that they found 12 weapons in the shooter's hotel room that were fashioned with bump stocks. Now, interestingly enough, the NRA has released a statement saying that, yeah, maybe Congress should consider regulation of this device. Let me read you their exact statement. Of course, there's a little political jab in the beginning of it. Despite the fact that the Obama administration approved the sale of bump stocks on at least 2 occasions, the National Rifle Association is calling on the ATF to immediately review whether these devices comply with federal law. The NRA believes that devices designed to allow semi-automatic rifles to function like fully automatic rifles should be subject to additional regulations.
So there's 2 things happening there. They say that the ATF should review these devices to see if they comply with federal law. They also say that the Obama administration okayed it. Who do you think okayed it? The ATF.
That's right.
It's a statement from the ATF. So this is a very strange thing to say. I love the second part. I love the second part where it says we think that we should have, the law which says no automatic weapons, which has been in place for since the 80s.
Yeah.
The spirit of that law is we don't want automatic weapons because we don't want rounds to be fired off that fast. We should make sure that in practice, that's what we're making sure happens, is that people don't fire off rounds that fast. But to send it back to the ATF, you're just doing the same thing again.
You're right. You are absolutely right about that. And I like that you specified it because look, what they were referring to when they said the Obama administration okayed these bump stocks was correct, but in revealing that, they also reveal that they might be a little disingenuous in their statement. So let me give you the historical context of it, okay? So I'm gonna skip ahead to graphic 19A. And there were 2 companies that were trying to market these bump stocks, but they were concerned about their legality. And so they wanted to make sure that they could talk to the government about it and make sure they're complying with federal laws. In marketing the devices, 2 Texas companies, Bump Fire Systems and Slide Fire Solutions, were apparently concerned that they would not be legal. But in June of 2010, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, or ATF, sent a letter saying that the company's bump stock product is a firearm part and is not regulated as a firearm under the Gun Control Act or the National Firearms Act. So that is the first time that the Obama administration okayed the bump stocks. Now, I was trying to find an example of the second time that the NRA referenced in their statement. I couldn't find anything, but the only thing I did find was that Dianne Feinstein introduced a bill back in January of 2013 asking to ban bump stocks. And Republicans and some Democrats were so resistant to that legislation, which also included other gun control measures, that it didn't even come up for a vote. So maybe that's the second time that they're referring to, but I don't see any other example of the Obama administration trying to ban it, trying to approve it.
Bump stock's not the only thing that allows your gun to do this.
Right.
That's what's so true. That's what's. It's great. You want to say Obama okayed it? Fine, burn, you got me. I'm sorry. Oh, let's get rid of them.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about now is we're going to focus on bump stocks and not the other. I mean, there's so many devices out there. There's one that's like a glove that just has a little device on the end that goes like this. There's another one that's like a little clip that goes behind your gun, your trigger, so that you pull on the trigger and it pushes back. And that happens. There's another one that looks like a Gatling gun wheel that you just stick in there and you go like this and it shoots just as fast. When you read the actual letter that the ATF sent back to the manufacturers, who, to their credit, the makers of this were like, I want to make sure that it's legal, so they went through their process. If you read that, the ATF is like, I read my law, and my law says it needs to have certain, in order to ban something, it needs to be a gun with certain internal mechanisms that fire quickly, and this doesn't seem to have that. So the NRA is encouraging that regulations be put in place, but that would take an act of Congress, which they control.
You're right, and so the legislation that's written can't specifically single out bump stocks. It has to be written in such a way that makes it clear that any type of device that transforms a semi-automatic weapon to an automatic one is outlawed, it's banned, right? So look, that's why the wording of the legislation is so important. And my second point that's related to that is, and I'm guilty of this as well, and I want to be honest about it. A lot of times when it comes to people who are in Congress drafting this legislation, a lot of them don't even really understand how a lot of these weapons work or what's out there on the market. And I'm cognizant of that, and I'm also cognizant of my own limitations. So I try to be careful in what I propose, and I try to be careful about, understanding what I'm talking about, because I don't want to misinform anyone. But these are lawmakers who have strong positions on gun control or strong positions against them. And you just want to make sure that these lawmakers don't act out of emotion, and they actually look at the market and look at what's out there and draft legislation that's specific enough to deal with issues that would lead to terrible situations like this mass shooting.
But not even just out of emotion, out of a reflex is what it is. Like there's this one quote from the Gun Owners of America that says, "We see this as an item that is certainly protected by the Second Amendment, and realistically they are already on the market, so passing the law banning them isn't going to stop the bad guys like this creep in Las Vegas." It's like this Second Amendment, say the word Second Amendment, evil will do evil, and move on.
Yeah, I actually want to cite that quote because it comes from a very specific person. His name is Eric Pratt. He is the executive director of Gun Owners of America. And he's basically saying well, it's already out there in the market and criminals are gonna be criminals, so whatever. I can't believe anyone buys that argument, because then you can apply that argument to anything. You could apply it to anything. You could say, terrorists are gonna be terrorists, so how about we don't vet anyone that comes into the country? Why are we gonna pass regulations vetting Muslims? Vetting anyone, who cares? Let them in, because if the bad guys want to come into the country, they're going to come into the country.
Part of me says someone at the ATF will say, we'll just need to write a letter that says, actually, we looked at it and the spirit of the existing legislation is such that we want to ban the rapid fire, is what we're getting at, and that wording as it exists is okay to ban these things. The sad truth is, with this situation and a ton of other situations revolving around gun violence, is these things are sold out.
Yeah, they
everywhere.
are. So the two companies that I mentioned earlier that originally went to the ATF to see whether the device would be legal, their websites have crashed because of high demand. People are super excited and jazzed about it, which is insane. I want to read you a quote from one, I would say, courageous person in admitting to the public that he loves the idea of this part. Let's go to graphic 21. He says, this is a private citizen, but he spoke to the press about it. He says, I don't even have the gun for it, meaning the gun for the bump stock, but I want the stock just to have it down the line. I just like the idea of them and want to see how it feels and if it's worth it. For $100, it's almost not a bad investment to buy it, try it out, and sell it if I don't like it. I mean, just that, you know,
it's a
nonchalant attitude towards something that's used to kill so many people is amazing to me.
It's just like any product. You're introducing an element of scarcity and impending the idea that it would not be around anymore, so people are going to gobble them up and have them. But that's no reason not to do this. Like, there is every reason to stop the production of these products so that people do not go and get them, so that it does not happen again. And I am really happy that the NRA said this. I hope that everyone understands this is not the only you can't just say bump stock's done, let's move on. There are other items just like this, and if you are going to outlaw the bump stock, which a lot of people say is too hard to use because you have to like push and pull at the same time, these other ones are just like you put your finger in and that's it. We've got to get rid of things that makes semi-automatic weapons behave as automatic weapons.
Agreed.
The difference between the amount of bullets this shooter put off and a fully automatic weapon was 4 bullets in a minute. It was 90 and 94 or something like that, as opposed to in San Bernardino, it was like 24.
Right.
Which is still a lot, but you can't argue against the fact.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, just real quick, just to be fair, that was a statement from the NRA. Some Republicans are also saying that the regulation should be considered. It doesn't necessarily mean that these lawmakers, these Republican lawmakers, want the regulation and are aggressive about it, but they're saying it should be considered. So among those politicians, you have Representative Paul Ryan. This is graphic 14. You have Representative Paul Ryan, Senator John Cornyn, Lindsey Graham, Orrin Hatch, Marco Rubio, Carlos Curbelo, Mark Meadows, Bill Flores, Ron Johnson, David
Cicilline.
Thank you. Vern Buchanan, Kevin Yoder, and Bob Goodlatte.
Good latte. Good latte. Of the Starbucks good lattes.
So, okay. I mean,
yes, but like it's one of those, great.
Yeah.
Yes, we agree, and I'm so happy. Way to go, America. We're all rallying around this. Let's make it happen today.
All right, we got to take one more break. Let's do that. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you just how much lawmakers have received from the NRA. And then later on, lobbyists who are upset that they're not getting what they want. We'll see you in a second.
I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Hassan D. Piker and on Twitter at Hassan the Hun. And this has been The Breakdown. Was that good, guys?
Okay. Not enough hashtag use. Hashtag abs, hashtag model, hashtag woke bay.
Hashtag one black friend.
I'm thinking more rings.
I got him here.
You need more accessories. Way more accessories.
I don't know where to put it.
Come on, throw these on. Woke bay, not sleep bay.
More sexy too.
When's the last time you posted on Instagram? Too long. Come on, man. No, you need to post at least once an hour. What's the outfit of the day today? Is this what you're going with? No. We need more accessories. We need.
This doesn't have anything to do. It doesn't.
For your gay audience, man.
Yeah, the gays love you, man.
Okay. What else? What else do I need to do?
You haven't appropriated a culture in a week.
We have like a kimono or something.
Damn, that looks good on you, dude.
Perfect. How many rings you got on? Do we have any more?
I got 3 more.
Yeah, can we get more rings on this?
And when you're done, kiss the ring. Look at the camera. Kiss the ring. Maybe like a little wink.
Islam's role in terrorism and all the Huffington Post articles weren't doing well. I wasn't.
How many likes did our last outfit of the day picture have?
Only like 100,000.
So I think that's where your focus needs to be. I hear you on all the blah, blah, blah social issue. We need to focus on followers.
Kids in Yemen.
We don't care if you sleep at night.
Dab, dab.
Okay, I'll dab.
There you go.
More.
Talk about yourself more.
I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, be more into it.
Instagram is important for me. Americans losing access to healthcare coverage.
I hear you. Attack Tommy more.
I've done it so many. She shoots out of her living room now. It's like punching down now.
We're okay with that. But it helps the brand.
We made you. We got you verified.
You're nothing without us.
So I don't know what else I need to do here.
Dude, just take off that shirt.
That's exactly why Tommy Lauren is stupid. I hate you. I'm Hassan Piker. Follow me on Instagram.
Hashtag woke bay.
Hashtag woke bay. Please follow me. Please.
You have in common with your daughter?
I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that to her.
said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna and Brett with you. All right, some TYT lives. Old Turk writes in, nice to finally see body cam footage of a cop being a hero.
Yes, it is. I mean, those cops, the look on that one young cop's face of what the hell is going on, it gave you all the experiences of people who are looking out for folks in danger. And then at least, I listened to the whole police scanner, hour and a half of it. And the way that a lot of the police were able to keep a level head. And when it got too intense, everyone's saying, let's calm down. Coming in and out, I mean, yeah, I agree, Old Turk.
All right, I want to quickly go through how much money the NRA has given to specific lawmakers, because it's relevant. It really is, especially considering what's going on in the country currently. The NRA spends a considerable amount of its resources in influencing our lawmakers in order to prevent them from passing or even proposing gun legislation. Anything that would limit the sales of gun manufacturers here in the United States is what the NRA is against. And so just how much money do our lawmakers receive from the NRA? Well, we have some specific examples, and we'll start with the Senate. Now, these are the top 10 recipients of NRA lobbying money, and the numbers are insane. So let's start with John McCain from Arizona, of course, the senator. He has received $7,740,000 from the NRA, which is incredible. Then you have Richard Burr. He is the second largest recipient from the NRA in the Senate, almost $7 million as well. Then you have Roy Blunt at $4.5 million. Tom Tillis at $4.4 million. The list goes on and on. Senator Cory Gardner at $3.8 million, almost 3.9. And just look at that list and consider the fact that John McCain, who is the top recipient, just recently went on and on about how we need to get money out of politics. Maybe because he knows from firsthand experience that money's real sweet when you're a lawmaker, and it will prevent you from proposing or voting in favor of common sense regulation that would ban something like the bump stock that the shooter used in this Las Vegas mass shooting. By the way, a number of these lawmakers have said they didn't even know that the bump stock existed. I don't know if bump stock existed, right? Dianne Feinstein proposed legislation in January of 2013 asking for a ban of bump stocks. There were other measures in that legislation that would limit the sale of some guns, and it would also include background checks, things like that. And it didn't even come up for a vote. Okay, so I don't know, maybe, they never read the legislation anyway, so maybe they're right. Maybe they didn't actually read and know about bump stocks, but it's just hard for me to believe that.
If it was important enough, it would have been in the lecture and they wouldn't have had to do all the reading. If they just came to class, listened to the arguments, it would have been in that. I like there's, the New York Times has this breakdown and they go with the number that people are donated. Or received from the NRA, and then their tweet response. And what's interesting is there is a correlation. If you are getting over about $1 million, you'll be tweeting about thoughts and prayers. You get the thought and prayer package. Under $1 million, you get thoughts or prayers. You might get.
That's crazy.
You might just get thoughts. NRA, kick it up a little bit. We'll get to the prayer level.
Well, someone's thoughts will definitely make these victims feel better.
They're all thoughts, that hoe over there, bang, nailed it. Here's the other thing is, the money's going no matter what. That's the John McCain thing. I don't want to wrap my mind around him as a person. I can't really reconcile all that's happening into one person. But I will say the money's gonna go to somewhere. And that's how they talk themselves into it, if there is any moral qualm about it.
No, they talked themselves into it the same way that Hillary Clinton talked herself into it during this past election. And this is not an issue that solely impacts Republicans. This is an issue that impacts every single member of Congress. And honestly, I have only found, I wouldn't even say a handful, like 2 senators that are not influenced by corporate money and are principled in their beliefs, which I respect. Bernie Sanders being one of them, of course, right? But look, Hillary Clinton and her supporters made the argument over and over again that, you gotta do this to win. You gotta do this to win. You have no other choice. This is just how the system is. No, but if you see that this system is corrupt and it's problematic, you're one of the most powerful people. Like you could be a leader in this issue and change it. But they like this system. They don't want to stir the pot, right?
It's so easy. It goes back to the story we were talking about where it's like the market already has bump stocks. It's gonna be too much of a pain in the ass to get rid of them. Why would I change it? But it is that fear that everybody's replaceable. Not to turn the gun debate into an episode of Dance Moms, but that's what Abby Lee Miller says, is that everyone's replaceable. So the NRA is going to fund someone if you turn against them.
It is interesting though, because I think most Americans feel this need to do something that makes them feel like they have a purpose that fulfills them. And so how is it fulfilling in any way to be a lawmaker if you don't get to carry out, your vision of a better country, where someone else, the wealthiest people in the country, have complete power over you and the decisions you make? I don't want that.
Well, their just definition of a good country is different from yours. They have it. They nailed it. They're doing it. So you're putting onto them your ideal of America, and I am more inclined to agree with you on that. Yeah. But if you're saying no,
I'm not even. By the way, to be clear, I'm not even talking about my specific progressive ideals. I'm just talking about let's be specific. So this whole gun debate, right? Over the Newtown massacre. After that happened, all those little kids were murdered.
Right.
That they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. And it's because the lobby is so incredibly powerful. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, what the NRA does, and you'll notice it after every single one of these, is they shelter in place. Because they know how it works, because they've done their lead work to get the Republican politicians and the members of Fox News to go ahead and say, anyone who says now's the time to talk about changing things is politicizing this. And so the NRA just gets to back off and be like, all right, whatever. Because without them having to do any additional work, already NRA membership goes up.
You're right.
Because already people are afraid, because they know that in the wake of all of this, people on the Democratic side are gonna say, what the Democrats say.
Can we please do something about this?
Well, it's the what I mean, we're not going to cover it on today's show, but what Hannity sat down with Tomi Lahren and said is that why are they politicizing this? The bodies aren't even cold.
Why do they politicize?
But it's not. It's not
right.
That's what it is. It's not politicizing anything. How is it political to say, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Versus, let's not change. Let's do the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And what's so frustrating about the Hannity thing is that he says, I'm all for common sense gun legislation. And that's it. That's all any of us are for. That's all most of the people are for. And it's frustrating to hear folks say that this is now a discussion over getting rid of all guns in America, period. Because it never is.
It never was,
it's
exactly.
Not fair to the conversation. And that's politicizing it.
Right, well, they want to make it seem as though it's a black or white issue. You either have guns or you don't. And that's just not the case.
And disingenuous politicization, if you want to hear that. Look at the names of their gun bills. Two silencer acts, one called the Share Act.
The other one called the
Protect Hearing Act.
The Hearing Protection Act.
The Hearing Protection Act is what they call their silencer bill to protect your ears.
You might get killed. You might get killed, but we're gonna protect your ears, just in case. All right. Shifting gears a little bit, I really want to get to this story because even though it's tied to what we just talked about, something's happening with these huge GOP donors that's delightful, and I know you'll enjoy it. All right. GOP donors are increasingly frustrated with the fact that the Trump administration and Congress specifically has failed to pass any legislative wins. The efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act have failed, and they failed several times during the same administration. And these donors have spent millions of dollars in trying to buy these politicians to get their agendas through. And some of the statements that Politico is reporting from these donors is absolutely delicious and delightful because it's very different from what we've seen. Usually they get their way. Right now they're not. They're like, but wait, I'm supposed to be able to buy everything. How am I not able to buy these legislative wins? So let me give you some examples. The GOP leaders should know no movement on remaining agenda, tax reform, infrastructure, deregulation, etc. means no funding from supporters like me. No meetings, calls, contributions until we see progress. That was according to one GOP funder. And that person wasn't identified, but we do have plenty who are identified. At a recent dinner at the home of at the recent dinner of the home of a Los Angeles billionaire, Robert Day, Thomas Wachtel, a retired oil and gas investor and party contributor, delivered an urgent message. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, just do something. He continued to say, anybody who was there knew that I was not happy. And I don't think anybody was happy. How could you be? You're never going to get a more sympathetic Republican than I am, but I'm sick and tired of nothing happening. So they want, the same things that the right wing, multinational corporations have wanted for a long time. Deregulation, not being forced to provide health care to their employees, anything that would decrease their bottom line or impact their bottom line in what they see as a negative way. North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis told his colleagues at a recent conference meeting that donations had fallen off a cliff after the Obamacare flop. I'm not sure which flop because there have been several. The committee's haul plummeted to just $2 million in July and August, less than half of what was raised in June.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so nice.
No more toys.
I like it. But it's interesting because for the first time, I feel like the electorate is awake. And that's not to say that everyone in the electorate wants the same thing. But when it comes to the healthcare debate, like you remember those town halls months ago where people would meet those lawmakers with fury because they were afraid that they were gonna lose their coverage. And so it's hard for them to pass something when Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski is concerned about her constituents and concerned that they'll vote her or vote them out of office.
Yeah, and the other side of this, it cuts out the one thing that the establishment Republicans had, which was the money and the clout. Because the Roy Moore side of it, the Steve Bannon showing up and saying these establishment Republicans showed up with their money and they threw it at this campaign and you guys were able to win. And then he said something really creepy, which was a vote for Roy Moore is a vote for Donald Trump. Even, I mean, he literally said that at a Roy Moore rally, even though Donald Trump was for the other guy. But now the other guy isn't necessarily gonna have the money to back him up, so he can't even do those ad buys.
Right, so Luther Strange, who was up against Roy Moore in the primary, received $8 million from GOP donors and lost. And so GOP donors are really upset. And I don't think this is about Trump. I think this is about what Trump represented, which was this anti-establishment candidate. But we all know that Trump is the type of person who has exploited and taken advantage of the establishment. He's loved the establishment. The only thing that makes him different is his rhetoric and his insane incompetence. But I do want to go to a few more quotes because they're amazing. So let's hear from another GOP donor. He says, when you're in a business and you tell your stakeholders you're going to build a building or something, you have to follow through. I can't borrow money to build a building and then not follow through, which is what these guys are doing. That's from Dan Eberhardt, and he has spent a considerable amount of money on these candidates as well. Not very happy with the lack of legislative wins.
So anyone who tells you that donors don't expect a quid pro quo on their investment, this is the proof that they do.
That's right.
This is the proof that in the minds of these successful business people who, and they're saying it, like, I consider the political system in America the same way I consider a construction site or frickin' Home Depot for that matter. If I'm paying for something, I wanna get something. So you can, by virtue of this, follow the money, and it shows you that, I mean, why would they be donating if they didn't want something?
That's right. And then
this proves that they've been getting it. And now they're not, and now they're
now they're not, and it's all of a sudden things are a little different, and they're freaking out about it. They don't understand it, and it shows you that they don't really even have a pulse on what's going on in the country, right? They don't even see this anti-establishment uprising that's happening on both sides. By the way,
that's it. Like it's the uncertainty, it's the chaos, and to be fair, there's a lot of different factors at play. We need to look at what's happening in the Roy Moore, Luther Strange election. But there are a lot of other things that are happening that could have contributed one way or another. There is the idea that Luther Strange was investigating corruption, and as a way to get him to back off, they appointed him to become the senator to replace Jeff Sessions, and Alabama got pissed off at that, and that kept a lot of people away. And so that's one of the many factors that are at play. But then at the end of this, we are gonna come away with a true narrative of what's happening, and it's the ones who are smart enough to figure out what is actually going on, put together a strategy. I think one of the potential traps of this is for everybody to go, we won.
Yeah.
This is one of those, all right, we won this battle, take 24 hours to celebrate, get back to work.
Yeah, and then one final thing I wanted to quickly bring up, because it shows you what the priorities were for Donald Trump on Monday of this week, which was the day after that mass shooting in Las Vegas. According to Politico, on Monday, Trump met with the party's most prominent donor, Las Vegas casino mogul Sheldon Adelson, who has privately expressed frustration that the president hasn't moved the US embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Yeah, I guess that's what the priority was, to meet with freaking Sheldon Adelson, or Adelson, whatever, about that issue. Anyway, so that does it for hour one. And when we come back, we will begin hour two and talk about a little bit of entertainment news. Harvey Weinstein, drams, an admission, drams. And Grace Baldridge will join us, and it's gonna be great, so come right back.
Now you guys are gonna think, especially my early behind the scenes footage, like I already went and looked at the comments in the member section. You guys, oh, he's high, he's drunk. I swear to you, I'm not. Well, I just tell you if I am, right? And so I get goofy in the behind the scenes stuff.
What's the need for the butter with this pretzel? This is already super fattening it up. You don't need to put butter on this thing. Why'd they make me do it, Bitsy? Why'd they make me do it?
Hey, I'm just saying that this is known as the rear end guy. There's no way that every person he knows doesn't call him the rear end guy. I want you guys to see if you could see the lightning bugs. Whoa. Light them up. Light them up.
Is it true, Bitsy? I will now watch it later.
Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat. Imagine him, isn't it? Hey, Kiki Cat. Kiki Cat. All right, this is Kiki Cat signing out.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I should have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
This is the Gaslamp Killer. Piece to Absent presents 2016 shit. I like drums. I like big drums. Heavy, funky drums. I'm not classically trained. I just started out as a record collector. I have synthesizers. I have all these modular synths and fun DJ tools that I use to make psychedelic sounds. It's not just the music. People want to leave their bodies in order to connect with the spirit world. And when you're making music, it's a similar kind of thing. You want to escape your day-to-day to leaving this shit behind and finding more of a deeper place to create from. That is the essence of Gaslamp Killer music.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
Aaron, I'm reading some of the comments on a YouTube video I did. What's a cuck? Go.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian, Grace, and Wow, I'm like stuttering like crazy. Ambry and Grace join us for hour 2. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm super excited for hour 2 because we don't ever really have female panels.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm very excited.
It's gonna be good.
And it's great for the stories that we have today.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Perfect.
So real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and read a few TYT Lives and then Grace will take it away.
Cool.
I am Sock writes in, do Republicans take a blood oath that makes it impossible for them to pass gun laws, raise taxes, or not try to ban abortion? I don't even know. Look, I think that those issues have different influences, right? I think with taxes, certainly there are lobbyists behind it, but a lot of them are wealthy themselves. Like lawmakers make a lot of money, you know, like. And so do people in corporate media. So that's one of the reasons why they don't really talk about it as aggressively as members of independent media. So
the incentive isn't there.
That's exactly right. With abortion, I think it's pandering to the religious base, right? I don't think it's because they genuinely think a zygote is the same as a living, breathing human. And then when it comes to guns, I mean, we know how powerful the NRA is. So, all right, I want you to take it away. You do your thing.
All right, so we have a quick update from a story from yesterday. You may remember hearing about Representative Tim Murphy. He is the embattled anti-abortion lawmaker who allegedly encouraged his mistress to terminate her own pregnancy. He had said that he was going to resign from office or retire after 2018. Well, now it has come out that he is actually going to resign at the end of this month. From Paul Ryan, this afternoon I received a letter of resignation from Congressman Tim Murphy effective October 21st. Speaker Paul Ryan said in a statement, "It was Dr. Murphy's decision to move on to the next chapter of his life, and I support it." So I guess no big shocker here. Were you guys surprised when you heard that this was news today?
I guess I was a little surprised because we're in this like new world of Republican lawmakers doing things that are so deeply hypocritical and embarrassing and then not apologizing for it, like doubling down on it.
And no consequences.
And no consequences. So I was like, oh wow, he's gonna step down. That's actually pretty amazing. And I'm glad that he is, and he should.
Yeah, I think it's straightforward. He should. I agree that we're in an age where it's like, oh, we kind of legislate morality and we kind of do immoral things and there are no consequences for it. I think because it was so glaring, and I think Paul Ryan even, he says that it was his own decision to step down, but I feel like, we know that a couple of congressmen went to see him like, you gotta leave.
Yeah, when he was like, I supported it, was basically being like, and I urged it.
Right, yeah, you gotta get the hell out of here.
So yeah, so that's a little quick update for you guys, and now we can move into some news stories to cover today. The first being one that is near and dear to my heart, affects my own LGBT community. So, Jeff Sessions has just announced that they will be reversing a policy that protects transgender workers from discrimination. This is for his Justice Department. Let me break down exactly what we're talking about. US Attorney General Jeff Sessions has reversed a federal government policy that said transgender workers were protected from discrimination under a 1964 civil rights law, according to a memo on Wednesday sent to agency heads and US attorneys. Sessions' directive says Title VII's prohibition on sex discrimination encompasses discrimination between men and women, but does not encompass discrimination based on gender identity per se, including transgender status. So this is likely going to result in the Justice Department fighting against transgender workers in court. We're gonna see how that's gonna play out. They go on to say in this directive, this is a conclusion of law, not policy. As a law enforcement agency, the Department of Justice may interpret Title VII as written by Congress. Now, of course, there's a counter opinion to this. Sharon McGowan is a former lawyer for the Justice Department Civil Rights Division and now is an attorney for the LGBT group Lambda Legal. Shout out Lambda Legal. My fiance is an attorney and they do good work. It's ironic for them to say this is law and not policy. The memo is devoid of discussion of the way case law has been developing in this area for the last few years. It demonstrates that this memo is not actually a reflection of the law as it is. It is a reflection of what the DOJ wishes the law were. Now, this is something that they point out in this article. I think it's important because it affects my interpretation of what's going on. At issue in the latest policy is how broadly the government interprets Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which does not address the LGBT rights directly. Rather, it prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. And what we are seeing from the Justice Department, as I think perfectly stated by Devin O'Malley, he says the following: the Department of Justice cannot expand the law beyond what Congress has provided. Basically, what we saw in the Obama administration is a pretty broad interpretation on what these protections afford and who they should be protecting. And now we are seeing the Trump administration over time sort of roll back those protections. We actually reported on it on a Title VII issue where the Justice Department issued an amicus brief over an appeals case from New York's Second Circuit. It was very strange that the federal government would get involved. Now they're issuing another briefing on this. Let's hear from you guys, because this is very frustrating for me and my community.
So I wanna comment on the interpretation of the law in a second. But first, I just wanna make a point about how crazy it is that this is what Jeff Sessions thinks is important right now. Like stripping away protections for entire groups of people. That is his objective. That is what he feels is important to do as, Attorney General. Like he thinks that is a priority right now, stripping away protections against discrimination for an entire group of people. It's strange if you want to be nice, but I want to use other words, which I will refrain from doing right now. In terms of the law, though, it really comes down to the way it's interpreted, right? And so if I were to be honest, I don't think that Congress wrote the law in 1964 with the LGBT community in mind at all. And did they purposely write it in a way so it's broad to maybe include people who identify with a different gender? Honestly, probably not. But that's the way, as you mentioned, the Obama administration interpreted it. So if this is a situation that makes it to the courts and you have federal judges making decisions on it, it really depends on their interpretation of it and whether they think that this was a specific law that pertains only to men and women and discrimination between those two, or if it's something that could be interpreted as vague enough to include the LGBT community.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of Jeff Sessions, I think the statement Jeff Sessions has just announced has become like my least favorite thing to hear. Right. Because I think, while he was embroiled in all of the drama and everyone was concerned that why doesn't he just step down because he and Trump were having this kind of contentious relationship. No, like Jeff Sessions has a vested interest in rolling back civil rights. Like he's going to stick around until he sees that through. And he's made that clear, not only with kind of these memos, these weak memos that he's written with regard to rolling back protections for the LGBTQ plus community, but also declaring a war on drugs, right? Also decreasing the Obama era kind of legislation on closing private prisons, right? Like that was something that he introduced. Like so, and then like oh gosh, why we're just all fumbling words today, but reverse discrimination in college admissions, right? So all of these things that aren't really issues that he's kind of really dug his heels into. Meanwhile, we have like real issues that we'd like our Justice Department to investigate.
Right. And look, right now there's also this issue between Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions over Sessions recusing himself in the Russia administration. And I have never wanted Trump to fire anyone more, right? If he were to fire Sessions for that reason, it would be one of the worst reasons to fire someone, but I'll take it.
If the consequences, and I do think that we do need to amend the Civil Rights Act so there are explicit protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. To your point, I think at the time, right, our notions of sex and conceptions of sex at the time were very basic, and we didn't acknowledge the fact that sex and gender are socially constructed. They're not these fixed things. So our society is pushing back against that. We need policies that reflect that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I hate that I have to read through this, and I unfortunately can see exactly the point of the Justice Department here, because they are saying that, hey, these provisions are not literally included in the law. It's just up to interpretation. Obama administration interpreted one way, we're gonna say something different. I hate that I can agree with them on that. It's true, there aren't those provisions in Title VII. So why don't we change that? Let's change that. It should be amended. This is not 1964 anymore. The law needs to be changed. I would like to see that incentive rather than just Devin O'Malley saying, oh, we can't expand the law beyond what Congress has provided. We would have no idea what to do. We should work on that, man.
Right, you're absolutely right. And just to give you another example, after the Supreme Court ruled against the Defense of Marriage Act, there was also this issue about how, okay, well, now there's marriage equality, but remember, we don't have a federal law banning employers from discriminating against gay employees.
Sure.
So that's another example of a situation where congressional leaders need to be leaders, and they haven't been so far, and that's cause for concern.
Yeah, and force Republicans to openly vote against it, right? Even if you don't think the amendment would pass, force them to openly say, we don't want this, we don't want folks to have these rights, right? Yeah. Instead of this statement saying, we will continue to affirm the dignity of all people, including transgender individuals. Like that's a lie. Force them to say it, to vote against it.
Perhaps even bullshit, perhaps. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Oh man, I love this woman so much. So the mayor of San Juan is making news for the following shirt that she wore on a news broadcast. Here it is, nasty. Now you may remember that is in reference to Donald Trump calling her nasty via tweet, because that's what we expect from our dignified politicians. This is also what she said on the news. So it's not just the shirt that's making news, it is her speaking out, it's her bold talk against the president and the administration. She says this was a PR 17-minute meeting. She said during an interview on MSNBC while wearing the shirt, she was describing a meeting the president had during his trip to Puerto Rico in which he assembled a round table of national and local officials and encouraged them to praise the federal response to the crisis on the island. She even went on to say, in fact, this terrible and abominable view of him throwing paper towels and throwing provisions at people, it does not embody the American spirit. And I'm sure she actually had some harsher words. Now, some people I saw on the internet were saying that her wearing the shirts, and this isn't the first time that she has worn a shirt that would sort of embody her position following Hurricane Maria. They say it's maybe petty, she doesn't need to go there. I vehemently disagree.
Okay,
I vehemently disagree, but what do you think about it?
I think, how about we take a little step back and understand who the real petty person is here, right? The petty person is the individual who talked about his penis size during the campaign. The petty individual is the one who attacks anyone who criticizes him in any way whatsoever. He can't take a tiny amount of criticism. Trump calls Kim Jong-un Rocket Man. He calls him Rocket Man. He's the one who referred to women as nasty in the first place. That's petty. It's so frustrating because it's as if he is completely exempt from any criticism from any of his actions, but she wears a shirt that says nasty, which I think is hilarious because Trump has redefined what nasty means, right?
Well, yeah.
It's now a badge of honor for women because if he thinks you're nasty, it means you get under his skin because you call him out on his BS.
And also, there are two sides of this too. Some people are saying she's petty. A lot of people are celebrating her as well because she's making the most of her time on the air. If you are in an airport, which is I assume where people watch news, if you're in an airport and it's on mute, you can't even watch it, then you can still see that she is wearing nasty on the shirt. Then it will bring to mind these tweets from Donald Trump. I think she's really getting her message home using a visual medium to the best of her ability and also using her words. So I think this is great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, everyone says that Trump is like a conflict president, right? That he likes conflict, but he likes conflict from afar, right? He tweets these things. The real presidential thing to do would have been to go to this area, would have been to meet one-on-one with her. If you think that she's getting too political, right, and you think that she's being problematic, then go have the conversation. Wade your ass in the water where she's at and go have the conversation instead of critiquing her from a distance, which I think is just cowardly. And it, again, obscures the fact that there is a natural disaster and there are people in need, right?
Exactly, and when he did go to Puerto Rico and he did meet with officials there, think about his behavior and how he refused to even acknowledge her. That's petty. So you wanna have a conversation about petty, that's petty.
Yeah.
I actually wish that maybe if they sold those shirts, I think a lot of people would actually buy it to support hurricane relief. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We got to take a quick break. So let's do that. When we come back, what are we talking about?
Talking about Harvey Weinstein. You guys have probably seen this scathing piece that the New York Times did on him. There's a lot going on there. We're also going to be talking about Cam Newton. Why is he making headlines? And a really interesting story from the Washington Post on a landscaper's desire to hire American and how it ended with him not hiring Americans.
T-minus 1 minute till landing. TYT broadcast controllers, listen up. Give me a go, no go for landing. Sound?
Audio is hovering at minus 12 decibels. We're go.
Streaming?
We're go.
Camera crew?
We're go.
Mission control?
We're go.
Snacks?
We're good.
Iguana?
Sir, we are go for landing.
Okay, everybody. I want this to go off without a hitch.
Sir? I've been looking over this joke for the past hour, and with the bandit firing now weeks old and waning in
English, Johnson, English. What are you trying to tell me?
This joke isn't going to land, sir.
Okay, everyone. Forget the old plan. From this moment on, we're improvising a new joke.
So this is where the show started, and this is where it was supposed to end. Now the joke was supposed to land here, but that's not gonna happen, obviously. So we need to come up with a new joke. Maybe here?
The hits are dropping, streams are failing, retweets are stopping.
40 seconds.
All right, team. We gotta find a way to make this fit into a joke about this that will appeal to them.
30 seconds.
The Trump joke's our safest option. Trying to land a Trump joke after this week's events is a suicide mission.
We are officially out of time. We need to act now.
Sir, I think our best course of action is to let Jink try to land a dad joke.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
All right, everyone, to their stations.
Germany, and some of the creditor nations like Netherlands and Finland.
Cameras, position, social media team. Brace front follows. 10 seconds. As for the rest of us, all any of us can do now is wait and hope.
This is gonna be the worst disaster TYT has ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I think this will be our finest hour 2 yet.
Giving mood, Angela Merkel's government seems to have signaled pronounced.
Come on, Jink.
Everyone, it's been a pleasure streaming with you.
Greek Prime Minister immediately picked up the phone to Putin and said, "You Putin any money in?" Okay, anyway.
TYT crew, the joke has landed.
welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian, Ambria Allen, and Grace Baldridge with you. I didn't stutter that time and make a fool out of myself.
Great.
All right, a few TYT lives for you.
Okay.
Alana says, Anna, my fiance makes fun of me for tweeting because you never pick mine. Please give a shout out so I can laugh at him.
Yay! Ha ha!
Equality.
Laughing at you.
All right, great. I love that we were able to help. Mixed Pancake says, Puerto Rico still needs help, but so comforting to know these repugs are more worried about trans folks and women's bodies. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, and again, a lot of it is about pandering, like with the 20-week abortion ban, pandering to that religious base. There is a reason why Trump tweeted about the transgender ban right after the first failed attempt to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And then finally, Gabby says, Jeff Sessions should be careful. The 1964 Civil Rights Act doesn't protect Keebler elves from discrimination either. That was pretty funny.
It's true, unless we interpret it as such. All right, let's get back into the hour. The New York Times has released a report detailing decades of sexual harassment accusations against Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein. An investigation by the New York Times found previously undisclosed allegations against Mr. Weinstein stretching over nearly 3 decades, documented through interviews with current and former employees and film industry workers, as well as legal records, emails and internal documents from the businesses he has run, Miramax and the Weinstein Company. During that time, after being confronted with allegations including sexual harassment and unwanted physical contact, Mr. Weinstein has reached at least 8 settlements with women, according to 2 company officials speaking on the condition of anonymity. Now, the report is extensive, it goes on, and it's important that if you're interested, you read the full thing, but there is a pattern that they point out, which is the following. Across the years and continents, accounts of Mr. Weinstein's conduct share a common narrative. Women reported to a hotel for what they thought were work reasons, only to discover that Mr. Weinstein, who has been married for most of 3 decades, sometimes seemed to have different interests. Now, an important person that they point out and that they cite is Lauren O'Connor, who is a former colleague of the Weinstein Company. She sent out a memo to several executives at the company, and they cite her a lot in this report. But that kind of gets a little blurry towards the end because Mr. Weinstein had reached a settlement with Miss O'Connor. She had withdrawn her complaint and there was no longer anything to investigate. Because this matter has been resolved and no further action is required, I withdraw my complaint, Miss O'Connor wrote in an email to the head of human resources 6 days after sending her memo. She also wrote a letter to Mr. Weinstein thanking him for the opportunity to learn about the entertainment industry. Weinstein's lawyers have announced that they are preparing to sue the Times, and all the proceeds of that suit will go towards women's organizations, but not before Harvey Weinstein released a kind of confusing statement of his own. I'm going to read in part, but again, check out the full statement. Here's part of it. I came of age in the 1960s and 70s when all the rules about behavior in workplaces were different. That was the culture then. I appreciate the way I've behaved with colleagues in the past has caused a lot of pain, and I sincerely apologize for it. I've brought on therapists and I plan to take a leave of absence from my company and to deal with this issue head on. I so respect all women and regret what happened. He also misquotes a Jay-Z lyric, and then he says that he's going to be pointing his full attention to the NRA.
No, this is
among other things.
This is the part that, first of all, please read the full New York Times report because it goes into many details, very graphic details, and there are so many women involved, and this took place over such a long period of time. So, and some of it occurred as recently as 2014. So I'm not buying his BS argument about how well, I grew up in a different culture, so I guess things have changed and now it's time for me. No, you should have noticed how much the culture has changed, and to do the same type of stuff in 2014 makes it abundantly clear that he didn't really care about the culture. He didn't take any of that into consideration. He was and is a man that has some degree of power, and he thought he could get away with it. Much like what happened at Fox News with Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly. But I do want to quickly mention how he ended his statement, because he couldn't just leave it at, I messed up and I need help and I'm getting help. He pandered. He pandered to individuals that are upset and emotional over what's going on with mass shootings in the country, and he just goes on this like spiel about, you know, what he wants to do personally to stop gun violence in America. And no.
Well, also within that exact same paragraph, he talks about how, you know, I hope Wayne LaPierre enjoys his retirement party. And then a couple sentences down, and this is the full sentence, is 1 year ago, I began organizing a $5 million foundation to give scholarships to women directors at USC.
So did Bill Cosby.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, you can be philanthropic and still be a rapist. Like, two things can be true. So you talking about all the money that you've given, you can keep your money and stop being a rapist and stop sexually assaulting folks. Like, they don't work against each other. Like, oh, I'm gonna be crazy, but then just give $1,000. Like, that's not how it works. Be a better person.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
And I feel like the way that he ended his statement was, again, trying to pander and trying to make him out to be, you know, this great person. And I feel like that unfortunately like nullifies anything else that he said, you know, in that statement. I will say this, I was actually shocked that he took responsibility, because that is not the way things usually play out. Like, we know that that's not how it played out at Fox News. Bill O'Reilly still denies it. Roger Ailes denied it till the day he died.
Right.
And in this case, you know, Weinstein is taking responsibility, which I'm glad he's doing that, but the way he ended that statement was so unnecessary.
The whole statement reads as though he said it aloud to Siri in a note and then was like, yeah, print that one. Yeah. That's the first thing that came to my mind, and that's the statement that I'm gonna go with. Down to misquoting Jay-Z. If you're gonna be releasing a statement, you know that's gonna be printed in the New York Times. Just double check the lyric before you.
Or don't quote Jay-Z.
Don't bring Jay-Z or any other public figure.
Don't bring him into that. Like, be a respectable person, or at least try to pretend that you are. You have all the opportunity to write something, revise it. Like, you have folks around you, apparently a team of therapists who you've been working with to help you not be a misogynist. I also think this speaks to the need to have more women in positions of power in these companies. Not to say that that's just the solution to sexual harassment, but it would certainly help. I mean, and I think even some of the women in the report talk about going before some of these panels and bringing other women with them to corroborate their story, right? So there's just power in terms of numbers and having representation of women in these spaces. I think it would help, particularly as the culture is changing.
It's crazy.
All right, so well, this is another great story to talk about for an all-female panel. NFL quarterback Cam Newton is making headlines for his response to a female reporter's question. Let's take a look.
I know you take a lot of pride in seeing your receivers play well. Devin Funchess has seemed to really embrace the physicality of his routes and getting those extra yards. Does that give you a little bit of an enjoyment to see him kind of truck sticking people out there?
It's funny to hear a female talk about routes, like, it's funny. But fun is coming along, man. We're gonna this is a big game for him because of, you know, him being from Detroit.
So that wasn't a particularly funny question. Jordan Rogue was the beat reporter for the Carolina Panthers. She has said on Twitter that she wasn't asking about routes to be funny. She was doing it because it was her job. She also went on to say, because a lot of people were asking, well, did you speak with Cam Newton following this interaction? She said on Twitter, I spoke with him after and it was worse. I chose not to share because I have an actual job to do today and one he will not keep me from. A lot of media organizations have spoken out about Cam's response. People are saying it was very inappropriate. One was the Association for Women in Sports Media. They said the following: AWSM is very discouraged by Cam Newton's disrespectful remarks and actions directed to a female reporter during today's Carolina Panthers press conference. As a watchdog group, AWSM demands fair treatment and positive workplace environments for women working in sports media. Now, a lot of people that I've seen online, I talked about this with the TYT sports team, who are excellent. Please check out their channel. Are saying, well, what is the importance of having female representation in a male-dominated industry? Well, let's just remember that nearly 50% of NFL fans are women, so they should be represented there, because without fans, you don't have a league. And then also, it's worth noting that Dannon has decided they will not renew a contract with him. I've heard it reported that Dannon dropped him. That's not the case. They're just not renewing their contract. And now, with that said, we have an all-female panel today to discuss why these remarks are inappropriate and disrespectful. What was your response when you saw this? Were you surprised?
Well, I don't know anything about him, so was I surprised? No. When people were mentioning his name, I'm like, I don't know who that guy is. So I didn't know anything about his background. And the reason why I say I'm not surprised is because, that mentality still exists in the sports world, where it's like surprising to some people that women are interested in sports, that women want to report on sports. And I'm also not surprised because it involves an NFL player, and the culture around the NFL, even considering the fact that 50% or half of their viewers are women and half of their consumers are women, more importantly, they still try to back their players when in domestic assault cases. Those stories were running rampant a couple years ago. They back their players when it comes to most situations like this, and they'll try to brush it under the rug. And even today, I forget which NFL official it was, I apologize, but I was listening to his statement, and he essentially said, he kind of brushed it off and then said, but I'd rather talk about this upcoming game, and immediately talked about the upcoming game. So look, I think it's important to consider that in a lot of households, the female has a considerable amount of buying power. She budgets the money. I'm not saying that that's the most important thing to consider, but for those of you who are like, oh, whatever, who cares? Don't hurt. You're hurting some people's feelings. It's not a big deal. Well, it will hurt your bottom line. So if you think it's not that big of a deal, I mean, we'll see how that turns out when your ticket sales decrease and your merchandise sales decrease. And then one other thing, someone had mentioned to me, I was debating a man over this, and he's like, I don't think that's what he meant. I was like, okay, so what did he mean? And I'm curious, does anyone have an answer for that? Because the individual I was debating couldn't give me an answer.
About what his potential intention could have been?
Like, what was he implying by laughing?
I don't know. I mean, what I would think is that he probably is interviewed a lot by men who are not professional football players. Now, it'd be different if she was playing an armchair quarterback and saying, oh, you missed that throw, like I could have done that. People do that sometimes. It's not good reporting. That's not what she did. She asked a very legitimate question. And if you were to have said that Jordan is actually a pretty gender neutral name, say that Jordan was a man, I don't think that he would have found the question as funny, even though, she maybe, or he or she doesn't have any football experience. Does that make sense? I think the only thing that I could think of is that he's laughing at a reporter asking a question that he presumes she'd have no experience over, but you don't need to have played the sport to have extensive knowledge of it.
No, dude, he specifically mentioned female. I think his wording was so specific. I just find it funny that a female is mentioning routes.
All right, so then would it have been different if he had said, I just find it funny that a reporter is asking me about routes. What do you know about routes? You haven't played the game. Would this be a news story?
Maybe some people would make it a news story, but I don't think that it would be as clear. And I don't even know if we would ever talk about it.
Most reporters haven't played. You know what I mean? That's why they were reporting. So I think the story is the obvious sexism. What bothers me is that he laughs in her face.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, it's just disrespectful. It's stupid.
So condescending.
It's really condescending and it's stupid. And to your point about the bottom line, you lost a yogurt endorsement. Bitches eat yogurt. Like, you gotta pay attention to who, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing?
But he still signed to Under Armour, and Under Armour, like, they're not gonna budge. Like, he still has other endorsements.
Yeah, Under Armour is also problematic for different reasons. But, I will say that this whole story is a good lesson in intersectionality, in that it did come out that this reporter, in her background, has some unsavory, potentially racist tweets.
Yeah.
So then now the conversation is about, she's racist and he's sexist, right? Like, again, my point, my motto is that two things can be true. Everybody needs to get their politics together. Cam, NFL, get your gender politics together.
And another thing that when we were covering the story that I asked our sports team about, that they brought up, is that there's a little bit of a double standard. They cited Rob Gronkowski is another NFL player, and they're saying that he's made sort of inappropriate remarks to reporters, female reporters, and I don't know the specifics of those statements, but I trust Jason Rubin very much, and he said that when he does that, he's being playful, he's messing around. Now Cam Newton makes this remark, which is again, it's still disrespectful, and he comes under national media scrutiny.
Sure.
And we don't see that carried over. Rob Gronkowski is a white player, just for reference.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, right.
Sure, all of this is racialized. I mean, our president is not under scrutiny, doesn't fall under the same kind of scrutiny, and he's said awful things about women. But I do think, again, two things can be true, that like, if we don't wanna be disrespected, let's work on our politics, our race politics, our gender politics, our politics around sex, right? Like, we need to be better. And I think that it's interesting that these two things kind of come to the fore at the same time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, do we have time for one more story?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So there's a really interesting article from the Washington Post that tells the story of Jesus Chuy Medrano. He's a landscaper from Denver, and he had this plan to hire American, and it really just ended up with him having to hire more Mexican workers. Let me break down the details here. So CoCal is a Denver-based landscaping company. It hires dozens of temporary workers from Mexico each year because it can't find enough Americans to take the jobs. And this is a company owned by Jesus Chuy Medrano. Now, in landscaping, tourism, seafood processing, and other seasonal industries, employers are desperate to find Americans who will stay on the job for the pay they are able to offer. $14 an hour is the starting salary at Medrano's firm. Until now, those industries have leaned heavily on a controversial visa program for seasonal workers called H-2B visas. But Congress has reduced the number of available visas by nearly 30% from 2016, and President Trump's promise to limit legal as well as illegal immigration and protect American workers has Medrano worried. He was once an undocumented worker, so he used to hire a lot of undocumented workers just to sort of pay it forward because it was what happened to him, how he got on his feet when he first came to the United States. But now he sees that the climate is changing in the country. He wanted to hire more American workers, but it didn't really work out. He raised the hourly wage for unskilled laborers to $13.95, 50% more than Colorado's minimum wage. He stopped firing workers for absenteeism, including a foreman who went AWOL during a 2-week drinking binge. He hired more women, allowing mothers to work just the hours their children are in school, as well as high school and college students on summer break. And still, he was short-staffed. Some showed up to orientation only to say, "I'm not going to do that for $14 an hour," Medrano recounted. New hires, unaccustomed to work boots, complained of sore, blistered feet. Some walked off the job after 3 days, and this drove him to a desperate point. CoCal had to submit paperwork showing that the company would suffer permanent irreparable harm without hiring migrants. The company's request was approved within 2 weeks, and Medrano was on his way to Mexico to meet with the workers, and they ended up completing their season, but it really had him scrambling at the end. This is such an interesting story. Please check out the full article on the Washington Post. But first, let me get a reaction from this.
Excuse me. I mean, I'm not surprised. This is something that happens over and over again. It happens with farmers, and farmers who increase the wages significantly, offer benefits, including healthcare, retirement plans. They do everything they can to attract American workers because they're concerned, especially under the Trump administration, that they will face some sort of consequence if they hire undocumented immigrants to do the work. And they can't find people who are willing to do the job. That's not based on my opinion. That's based on fact, what's happening throughout the country with various industries. And people don't believe it, but it's true. It's happening.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what he says is that, yeah, he was able to complete a season, he was able to get the work done, but he said that it was just like a little Band-Aid on the problem that his company is going to face. And he senses that the climate is changing, so he had to make some changes. But it reads like a parable. It really reads like, well, this law was put into place and then this happened and he tried to do this and then this happened. And it's really frustrating because this is an honest guy trying to make an honest living at his landscaping firm.
I just want to quickly mention one other specific example. There were wineries in Napa, California that had previously hired undocumented immigrants to pick the grapes. And that's a difficult job. And they decided, okay, we're going to comply with laws and ensure that we hire American workers. And guess what? Their grapes would rot because they couldn't find people to fill those jobs. So this is a real problem. And even with the wages increasing well above minimum wage, they're having a hard time, attracting those workers. And it's something to keep in mind when we're having these ridiculous black or white debates about immigration. So unfortunately, we're about to run out of time, but I do want to direct you guys to the post-game show, tytnetwork.com/join. If you'd like to be a member, we'll have a fun post-game show today. And Aggressive Progressives will happen later tonight, so make sure you check that out. Jimmy Dore will, of course, put together a great show for you guys. We'll see you soon. Love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.